the second book of Homer's Iliads, Part 1. The Argument. Jove calls a vision up from Somnus's den, to bid Atrides muster up his men. The king, to Greeks dissembling his desire, persuades them to their country to retire. By Pallas' will, Ulysses stays their flight, and wise old Nestor heartens them to fight. They take their meat, which done, to arms they go, and march in good array against the foe. So those of Troy, when Iris from the sky of Saturn's son performs the embassy. Another argument. Beta, the dreams and synod sites, and catalogues the naval nights. The other gods and knights at arms all night slept. Only Jove sweet slumber sees not. He discoursed how best he might approve his vow made for Achilles' grace, and make the Grecians find his miss in much death. Always cast, this counsel served his mind with most allowance, to dispatch a harmful dream to greet the king of men, and gave this charge: Go to the Argive fleet, pernicious dream, and being arrived in Agamemnon's tent, deliver truly all this charge. Command him to convent his whole host armed before these towers, for now Troy's broad-wayed town he shall take in. The heaven-housed gods are now indifferent grown. Juno's request hath won them. Troy now under imminent ills at all parts labours. This charge heard, the vision straight fulfills. The ships reached, and Atrides' tent, in which he found him laid, divine sleep poured about his powers. He stood above his head like Nestor, graced of old men most, and this did intimate: Sleeps the wise Atreus' tame horse son? A counsellor of state must not the whole night spend in sleep, to whom the people are for guard committed, and whose life stands bound to so much care. Now hear me then, Jove's messenger, who, though far off from thee, is near thee yet in ruth and care, and gives command by me to arm thy whole host. Thy strong hand the broad-wayed town of Troy shall now take in. No more the gods dissentiously employ their high-housed powers. Juno's suit hath won them all to her, and ill fates overhang these towers, addressed by Jupiter. Fix in thy mind this, nor forget to give it action when sweet sleep shall leave thee. Thus he fled, and left the king of men repeating in discourse his dream, and dreaming still, awake, of power, not ready yet for act. O fool! He thought to take in that next day old Priam's town, not knowing what affairs Jove had in purpose, who prepared by strong fight sighs and cares for Greeks and Trojans. The dream gone, his voice still murmured about the king's ears, who sate up, put on him in his bed his silken innerweed, fair, new, and then in haste arose, cast on his ample mantle, tied to his soft feet fair shoes. His silver-hilted sword he hung about his shoulder, took his father's sceptre never stained, which then abroad he shook, and went to fleet. And now great heaven goddess Aurora scaled to Jove and all gods, bringing light, when Agamemnon called his heralds, charging them aloud to call to instant court the thick-haired Greeks. The heralds called, the Greeks made quick resort. The council chiefly he composed of old great-minded men, at Nestor's ships, the Pylian king. All there assembled then, thus Atreus' son begun the court. Hear, friends, a dream divine amidst the calm of night in my sleep did through my shut eyes shine within my fantasy. His form did passing naturally resemble Nestor, such attire, a stature just as high. He stood above my head, and words thus fashioned did relate. Sleeps the wise Atreus' tame horse son? A counsellor of state must not the whole night spend in sleep, to whom the people are for guard committed, and whose life stands bound to so much care. Now hear me then, Jove's messenger, who, though far off from thee, is near thee yet in love and care, and gives command by me to arm thy whole host. Thy strong hand the broad-wayed town of Troy shall now take in. No more the gods dissentiously employ their high-housed powers. Saturnia's suit hath won them all to her, and ill fates overhang these towers, addressed by Jupiter. Fix in thy mind this. This expressed, he took wing and away, and sweet sleep left me. Let us then by all our means essay to arm our army. I will first, as far as fits our right, try their addictions, and command with full-sailed ships our flight, which if they yield to, oppose you. He sate, and uprose Nestor, of sandy Pylos king, who, willing to dispose their counsel to the public good, proposed this to the state. Princes and counsellors of Greece, if any should relate this vision but the king himself, it might be held a tale, and move the rather our retreat. But since our general affirms he sought, hold it true, and all our best means make to arm our army. This speech used, he first the council brake. The other sceptre-bearing states arose too, and obeyed the people's rector. Being abroad, the earth was overlaid with flockers to them, that came forth, as when a frequent bees' swarms rise out of a hollow rock, repairing the degrees of their aggression endlessly, with ever-rising new from forth their sweet nest, as their store, still as it faded, grew, and never would cease sending forth her clusters to the spring, they still crowd out so, this fleck here, that there, belabouring the loaded flowers. So from the ships and tents the army's store trooped to these princes and the court, along the unmeasured shore, amongst whom Jove's ambassadress Fame in her virtue shined, exceeding greediness to hear. The rabble, thus inclined, hurried together. Uproar seized the high court. Earth did groan beneath the settling multitude. Tumult was there alone. Three-voiced vociferous heralds rose to check the rout and get ear to their Jove-kept governors. And instantly was set that huge confusion. Every man set fast. The clamour ceased. Then stood divine Atrides up, and in his hand compressed his sceptre, the elaborate work of fiery Mulciber, who gave it to Saturnian Jove, Jove to his messenger Agricides to Pelops, skilled in horse, Pelops to Atreus, chief of men. He, dying, gave it course to Prince Thyestes, rich in herds. Thyestes to the hand of Agamemnon rendered it, and with it the command of many isles, and Argos all. On this he leaning, said, O friends, great sons of Danaus, servants of Mars, Jove laid a heavy curse on me, to vow and bind it with the bent of his high forehead, that this Troy of all her people spent, I should return. Yet now to mock our hopes built on his vow, and charged ingloriously my flight, when such an overthrow of brave friends I have authored. But to his mightiest will we must submit us, that hath raised, and will be raising still, men's footsteps from so many towns. Because his power is most, he will destroy most. But how vile such and so great an host will show to future times, that, matched with lesser numbers far, we fly, not putting on the crown of our so long-held war, of which there yet appears no end. Yet should our foes and we strike truce, and number both our powers, Troy taking all that be her armed inhabitants, and we, in tens, should all sit down at our truce banquet, every 10 allowed one of the town, to fill his feast cup, many tens would their attendant want. So much I must affirm our power exceeds the inhabitant. But their auxiliary bands, those brandishers of spears, from many cities drawn, are they that are our hinderers, not suffering well-raised Troy to fall. 9 years are ended now, since Jove our conquest vowed, and now our vessels rotten grow, our tackling falls, our wives, young sons, sit in their doors and long for our arrival. Yet the work that should have wreaked our wrong and made us welcome lies unwrought. Come then, as I bid, all obey, and fly to our loved home. For now, nor ever, shall our utmost take in broad-weight Troy. This said, the multitude was all for home, and all men else that what this would conclude had not discovered. All the crowd was shoved about the shore, in sway like rude and raging waves, roused with the fervent blore of the east and south winds, when they break from Jove's clouds and are borne on rough backs of the Icarian seas, or like a field of corn high grown, that Zephyr's vehement gusts bring easily underneath, and make the stiff up-bristled ears do homage to his breath. For even so easily, with the breath Atrides used, was swayed the violent multitude. To fleet with shouts and disarrayed, all rushed, and with a fog of dust their rude feet dimmed the day. Each cried to other, "Cleanse our ships! Come, launch! Aboard! Away!" The clamors of runners home reached heaven, and then, past fate, the Greeks had left Troy. Had not then the goddess of estate thus spoke to Pallas: "O foul shame, thou untamed seed of Jove! Shall thus the sea's broad back be charged with these our friends remove? Thus leaving Argive Helen here, thus Priam graced, thus Troy, in whose fields far from their loved own, for Helen's sake, the joy and life of so much Grecian birth is vanished? Take thy way to our brass-armed people, speak them fair. Let not a man obey the charge now given, nor launch one ship." She said, and Pallas did as she commanded. From the tops of heaven's steep hill she slid, and straight the Greeks' swift ships she reached. Ulysses, like to Jove in gifts of counsel, she found out, who to that base remove stirred not a foot, nor touched a ship, but grieved at heart to see that fault in others. To him close the blue-eyed deity made way, and said, "Thou wisest Greek, divine Laertes' son, thus fly ye homewards to your ships? Shall all this headlong run? Glory to Priam thus ye leave, glory to all his friends, if thus ye leave her here, for whom so many violent ends have closed your Greek eyes, and so far from their so loved home. Go to these people, use no stay, with fair terms overcome their foul endeavour. Not a man a flying sail let hoist." Thus spake she, and Ulysses knew 'twas Pallas by her voice. Ran to the runners, cast from him his mantle, which his man and herald, grave Eurybates, the Ithacensian that followed him, took up. Himself to Agamemnon went, his incorrupted sceptre took, his sceptre of descent, and with it went about the fleet. What prince or man of name he found flight given, he would restrain with words of gentlest blame. "Good sir, it fits not you to fly, or fare as one afraid. You should not only stay yourself, but see the people stayed. You know not clearly, though you heard the king's words, yet his mind. He only tries men's spirits now, and whom his trials find apt to this course he will chastise. Nor you nor I heard all he spake in council, nor durst press too near our general, lest we incensed him to our hurt. The anger of a king is mighty, he is kept of Jove, and from Jove likewise spring his honours, which out of the love of wise Jove he enjoys." Thus he the best sort used. The worst, whose spirits break out in noise, he cudgelled with his sceptre, chid, and said, "Stay, wretch, be still, and hear thy betters. Thou art base, and both in power and skill poor and unworthy, without name in council or in war. We must not all be kings, The rule is most irregular where many rule. One lord, one king propose to thee, and he to whom wise Saturn's son hath given both law and empery to rule the public is that king. Thus ruling, he restrained the host from flight, and then again the council was maintained with such a concourse that the shore rung with the tumult made, as when the far resounding sea doth in its rage invade his sandy confines, whose sides groan with his involved wave, and make his own breast echo sighs. All sate, and audience gave. Thersites only would speak all. A most disordered store of words he foolishly poured out, of which his mind held more than it could manage. Anything with which he could procure laughter he never could contain. He should have yet been sure to touch no kings. To oppose their states becomes not jesters' parts. But he, the filthiest fellow, was of all that had deserts in Troy's brave siege. He was squint-eyed and lame of either foot, so crook-backed that he had no breast, sharp-headed, where did shoot, here and there spersed, thin mossy hair. He most of all envied Ulysses and Aeacides, whom still his spleen would chide, nor could the sacred king himself avoid his saucy vein, against whom, since he knew the Greeks did vehemently hate sustain. Being angry for Achilles' wrong, he cried out, railing thus, Atrides, why complainst thou now? What wouldst thou more of us? Thy tents are full of brass and dames, the choice of all are thine, with whom we must present thee first, when any towns resign to our invasion. Want'st thou then, besides all this, more gold from Troy's knights to redeem their sons, whom to be dearly sold I or some other Greek must take? Or wouldst thou yet again force from some other lord his prize, to soothe the lusts that reign in thy encroaching appetite? It fits no prince to be prince of ill, and govern us, or lead our progeny by rape to ruin. O base Greeks, deserving infamy and ills eternal! Greekish girls, not Greeks ye are. Come, fly home with our ships. Leave this man here to perish with his praise, and try if we helped him or not. He wronged a man that weighs far more than he himself in worth. He forced from Thetis' son, and keeps his prize still. Nor think I that mighty man hath won the style of wrathful worthily. He's soft, he's too remiss, or else, Atrides, his had been thy last of injuries. Thus he the people's pastor chid, but straight stood up to him divine Ulysses, who with looks exceeding grave and grim this bitter check gave. Cease, vain fool, to vent thy railing vein on kings thus, though it serve thee well, nor think thou canst restrain with that thy railing faculty their wills in least degree. For not a worse of all this host came with our king than thee to Troy's great siege. Then do not take into that mouth of thine the names of kings, much less revile the dignities that shine in their supreme states. Resting thus this motion for our home to soothe thy cowardice, since ourselves yet know not what will come of these designments, if it be our good to stay or go. Nor is it that thou standest on, thou revilest our general so, only because he hath so much, not given by such as thou, but our heroes. Therefore this thy rude vein makes me vow, which shall be curiously observed, if ever I shall hear this madness from thy mouth again, let not Ulysses bear this head, nor be the father called of young Telemachus. If to thy nakedness I take and strip thee not, and thus whip thee to fleet from council, send with sharp stripes, weeping hence, this glory thou affects to rail. This said, his insolence he settled with his sceptre, struck his back and shoulders so that bloody wails rose. He shrunk round, and from his eyes did flow moist tears, and, looking filthily, he sate, feared, smarted, dried his blubbered cheeks, and all the priests, though grieved to be denied their wished retreat for home, yet laughed delightsomely, and spake either to other, O ye gods, how infinitely take Ulysses' virtues in our good, author of counsels, great in ordering armies, how most well this act became his heat, to beat from counsel this rude fool. I think his saucy spirit hereafter will not let his tongue abuse the sovereign merit, exempt from such base tongues as his. Thus spake the people. Then the city-raiser Ithacus stood up to speak again, holding his scepter. Close to him grey-eyed Minerva stood, and like a herald, silence caused, that all the archive brood, from first to last, might hear and know the counsel, when inclined to all their good. Ulysses said, Atrides, now I find these men would render thee the shame of all men, nor would pay their own vows to thee, when they took their free and honoured way from Argos hither, that till Troy were by their brave hands raised, they would not turn home. Yet, like babes and widows, now they haste to that base refuge. 'Tis a spite to see men melted so in womanish changes, though 'tis true that if a man do go only a month to sea, and leave his wife far off, and he, tortured with winter's storms, and tossed with a tumultuous sea, grows heavy, and would home. Us then, to whom the thrice year had filled his revoluble orb since our arrival here, I blame not to wish home much more, yet all this time to stay, out of our judgments, for our end, and now to take our way without it were absurd and vile. Sustain then, friends, abide the time to set our objective, try if Calchas prophesied true of the time or not. We know ye all can witness well, whom these late death-conferring fates have failed to send to hell, that when in Aulis all our fleet assembled with affright of ills to Ilion and her friends, beneath the fair-grown height a plantain bore, about a fount whence crystal water flowed, and near our holy altar we upon the gods bestowed accomplished hecatombs, and there appeared a huge portent, a dragon with a bloody scale, horrid to sight, and sent to light by great Olympius, which, crawling from beneath the altar, to the plantain climbed, and ruthless crashed to death a sparrow's young, in number 8, that in a top bough lay hid under leaves, the dam the 9th, that hovered every way mourning her loved birth, till at length the serpent watching her wing caught, and devoured her too. This dragon, Jupiter, that brought him forth, turned to a stone, and made a powerful mean to stir our zeals up, that admired, when of a fact so clean of all our ills as our sacrifice, so fearful and ostent should be the issue. Calchas then thus prophesied the event. Why are ye dumbstruck, fair-haired Greeks? Wise Jove is he hath shown this strave ostent to us. 'Twas late, and passing lately done, but that grace it foregoes to us, for suffering all the state of his appearance, being so slow, nor time shall end, nor fate. As these 8 sparrows, and the dam that made the 9th, were eat by this stern serpent, so 9 years we are to endure the heat of ravenous war, and in the 10th take in this broad-wayed town. Thus he interpreted this sign, and all things have their crown as he interpreted, till now. The rest then to succeed believe as certain. Stay we all, till that most glorious deed of taking this rich town our hands are honoured with. This said, the Greeks gave an unmeasured shout, which back the ships repaid with terrible echoes, in applause of that persuasion divine Ulysses used, which yet held no comparison with Nestor's next speech, which was this: O shameful thing! Ye talk like children all, that know not war. In what air's region walked are oaths and covenants? Now I see the fit respects of men are vanished quite, our right hands given, our faiths, our counsels vain, our sacrifice with wine, all fled in that profaned flame we made to blind all. For thus still we vain persuasions frame, and strive to work our end with words, not joining stratagems and hands together, though thus long the power of our extremes hath urged us to them. Atreus' son, firm as your first hour stand, make good thy purpose, talk no more in councils, but command in active field. Let 2 or 3 that by themselves advise faint in their crowning, they are such as are not truly wise. They will for Argos, ere they knew if that which Jove hath said be false or true. I tell them all that high Jove bowed his head, as first we went aboard our fleet, for sign we should confer these Trojans their due fate and death. Almighty Jupiter all that day darting forth his flames in an unmeasured light on our right hand. Let therefore none once dream of coward flight, till, for his own, some wife of Troy he sleeps withal, the rape of Helen wreaking, and our sighs enforced for her escape. If any yet dare dote on home, let his dishonored haste his black and well-built bark but touch, that as he first disgraced his country's spirit, fate and death may first his spirit let go. But be thou wise, king, do not trust thyself, but others. No, I will not use an abject word. See all thy men arrayed in tribes and nations, that tribes, nations may nations aid. Which doing, thou shalt know what chiefs, what soldiers, play the men, and what the cowards. For they all will fight in several then, easy for note. And then shalt thou, if thou destroyest not Troy, know if the prophecies defect, or men thou dost employ in their approved arts want in war, or lack of that brave heat fit for the venturous spirits of Greece, was the cause to thy defeat. To this the king of men replied, O father, all the sons of Greece thou conquerest in the strife of consultations. I would to Jove, Athena, and Phoebus I could make of all but 10 such counselors, then instantly would shake King Priam's city, by our hands laid hold on and laid waste. But Jove hath ordered I should grieve, and to that end hath cast my life into debates past end. Myself and Thetis' son, like girls, in words fought for a girl, and I the offence begun. But if we ever talk as friends, Troy thus deferred fall shall never vex us more 1 hour. Come then, to victuals all, that strong Mars all may bring to field. Each man his lance's steel see sharpened well, his shield well lined, his horses meted well, his chariot carefully made strong, that these affairs of death we all day may hold fiercely out. No man must rest or breathe. The bosoms of our targeteers must all be steeped in sweat. The lancer's arm must fall dissolved. Our chariot horse with heat must seem to melt. But if I find one soldier take the chase, or stir from fight, or fight not, still fixed in his enemy's face, or hid a shipboard, all the world for force nor price shall save his hated life, but fowls and dogs be his abhorred grave. He said, and such a murmur rose, as on a lofty shore the waves make, when the south wind comes, and tumbles them before against a rock, grown near the strand, which diversely beset is never free, but here and there with varied uproars beat. All rose then, rushing to the fleet, perfume their tents and eat, each offering to the immortal gods, and praying to scape the heat of war and death. The king of men, an ox of 5 years' spring, t'almighty Jove slew, called the peers, first Nestor, then the king Idomeneus, after them the Ajaces, and the son of Tydeus, Ithacus the 6th, in council paragon to Jove himself. All these he bade, but at a martial cry good Menelaus, since he saw his brother busily employed at that time, would not stand on invitation, but of himself came. All about the offering overthrown stood round, took salt cakes, and the king himself thus prayed for all. O Jove, most great, most glorious, that in that starry hall sits drawing dark clouds up to air, let not the sun go down, darkness supplying it, till my hands the palace and the town of Priam overthrow and burn, the arm on Hector's breast dividing, spoiling with my sword thousands, in interest of his bad quarrel laid by him in dust and eating earth. He prayed, Jove heard him not, but made more plentiful the birth of his sad toils, yet took his gifts. Prayers past, cakes on they threw. The ox then, to the altar drawn, they killed, and from him drew his hide, then cut him up, his thighs in two hewn, dubbed with fat, pricked on the sweetbreads, and with wood leaveless, and kindled at opposed fire, they burned the thighs, which done, the inward slit, they broiled on coals and eat. The rest, in gigots cut, they spit, roast cunningly, draw, sit, and feast. Not lack to leave allayed each temperate appetite. Which served, Nestor began and said, Atrides, most graced king of men, now no more words allow, nor more defer the deed Jove vows. Let heralds summon now the brazen-coated Greeks, and us range everywhere the host, to stir a strong war quickly up. This speech no syllable lost. The high-voiced heralds instantly he charged to call to arms the curled-head Greeks. They called, the Greeks straight answered their alarms. The Jove-kept kings about the king all gathered, with their aid ranged all in tribes and nations. With them the grey-eyed maid, great Aegis, Jove's bright shield sustained, that can be never old, never corrupted, fringed about with serpents forged of gold. As many all suffice to make 100 fringes, worth 100 oxen, every snake all sprawling, all set forth with wondrous spirit. Through the host with this the goddess ran, in fury casting round her eyes, and furnished every man with strength, exciting all to arms, and fight incessant. None now like their loved homes like the wars, and as a fire upon a huge wood, on the heights of hills that far off hurls his light, so the divine brass shined on these, thus thrusting on for fight. Their splendor through the air reached heaven, and as about the flood Caster, in an Asian mead, flocks of the airy brood, cranes, geese, or long-necked swans, here, there, proud of their pinions fly, and in their falls lay out such throats, that with their spiritful cry the meadow shrieks again. So here these many-nationed men flowed over the Scamandrian field, from tents and ships. The din was dreadful that the feet of men and horse beat out of earth, and in the flourishing mead they stood, thick as the odorous birth of flowers, or leaves bred in the spring, or thick as swarms of flies throng then to sheepcotes, when each swarm his erring wing applies to milk dewed on the milkmaid's pails, all eagerly disposed to give to ruin the Iliads. And as in rude heaps closed, though huge goatherds are at their food, the goatherds easily yet sort into sundry herds. So here the chiefs in battle set here tribes, here nations, ordering all, amongst whom shine the king, with eyes like lightning-loving Jove, his forehead answering, in breast like Neptune, Mars in waist, and as a goodly bull most eminent of all the herd, most wrong, most masterful. So Agamemnon, Jove that day made over-heightened clear, that the heaven-bright army, and preferred to all the heroes there. Now tell me, muses, you that dwell in heavenly roofs, for you are goddesses, are present here, are wise, and all things know. We only trust the voice of fame, know nothing, who they were that here were captains of the Greeks, commanding princes here. The multitude exceed my song, though fitted to my choice 10 tongues were, hardened palates 10, a breast of brass, a voice infract and trump-like. That great work, unless the seed of Jove, the deathless muses undertake, maintains a pitch above all mortal powers. The princes then and navy did bring those so inenerable troops, and all their soils I sing. End of the second book, Part 1. The second book of Homer's Iliads, Part 2. The Catalogue of Grecian Ships and Captains. Peneleus and Leotus, all that Boeotia bred, Arcesilaus, Clonius, and Protheenor led, the inhabitants of Hyria and stony Aulida, Skene, Scoli, the hilly Eetion, and holy Thespia of Graia, and great Mechalessa that hath the ample plain, of Harma and Elysius, and all that did remain in Erth, and in Elaon, in Highland, Petaona, in fair Ocalia, and the town well builded Medaona, Copus, Utresis, Thisbe, that for pigeons does surpass, of Coronea, Haliart, that hath such store of grass, all those that in Plataea dwelt, that Glyssa did possess, and Hypothebes, whose well-built walls are rare and fellowless, enrich on Castus's famous wood, to watery Neptune vowed, and Arne, where the vine trees are with vigorous bunches bowed, with them that dwelt in Medea, and Nyssa most divine, all those whom utmost Anthedon did wealthily confine. From all these coasts, in general, full 50 sail were sent, and 60 strong Boeotian youths in every burthen went. But those who in Aspledon dwelt, and Minion or Comen, god Mars's sons did lead, Ascalaphus and Ealman, who in Azadon Actor's house did of Astyoche come, the bashful maid, as she went up into the higher room, the war gods secretly compressed. In safe conduct of these did 30 hollow-bottomed barks divide the wavy seas. Brave Schedius and Epistrophus the Phocian captains were, now Bolida Iphitus's sons, all proof 'gainst any fear. With them the Cyparicians went, and bold Pythonians, men of religious Chrysa's soil, and fat Daulidians, Panopeans, and Amores, and fierce Hyampolists, and those that dwell where Cephius casts up his silken mists, the men that fair Lilia held near the Cephisian spring, all which did 40 sable barks to that designment bring. About the entoiled Phocensian fleet had these their sail assigned, and near to the sinister wing the armed Boeotians shined. Ajax the less, Oileus' son, the Locrians led to war, not like to Ajax Telamon, but lesser man by far. Little he was, and ever wore a breastplate made of lin, but for the manage of his lance he general praise did win. The dwellers of Caliarus, of Bessa Opoen, the youths of Sinus, Scarphus, and Augeas, lovely men, of Tarphus and of Thronius, near flood Boagrius' fall, twice 20 martial barks of these, less Ajax sailed withal, who near Euboea's blessed soil their habitations had, strength-breathing Abants, who their seats in sweet Euboea made, the Histiaeans rich in grapes, the men of Chalcida, the Sarinths bordering on the sea of rich Eretria, of Dion's highly seated town, Charistus, and of Styra, all these the Duke Alphenor led, a flame of Mars's fire, surnamed Chalcodon Tiades, the mighty Abant's guide, swift men afoot, whose broad-set backs their trailing hair did bide, well seen in fight, and soon could pierce the far-extended darts, the breastplates of their enemies, and reach their dearest hearts. 40 black men of war did sail in this Alphenor's charge, the soldiers that in Athens dwelt, a city builded large, the people of Eurystheus, whom Jove-sprung Pallas fed, and plenteous feeding Tellus brought out of her flowery bed. Him Pallas placed in her rich fane, and every ended year, of bulls and lambs the Athenian youths pleased him with offerings there. Mighty Menestheus, Peteus' son, had their divided care. For horsemen and for targeteers none could with him compare, nor put them into better place to hurt or to defend. But Nestor, for he elder was, with him did sole contend. With him came 50 sable sail, and out of Salamine great Ajax brought 12 sail, that with the Athenians did combine, who did in fruitful Argos dwell, or strong Tirintha keep, Henion, or in Aesonen, whose bosom is so deep, Troezina, Eion, Epidaure, where Bacchus crowns his head, Aegina and Macetta's soil did follow Diomed, and Sthenelus, the dear-loved son of famous Capaneus, together with Euryalus, heir of Mecisteus, the king of Talionides, past whom in deeds of war the famous soldier Diomed of all was held by far. 80 black ships did follow these, the men fair Mycenae held, the wealthy Corinth, Cleon that for beauteous sight excelled, Erythria's lovely seat, and in Ornia's plain, and Sicyana, where at first did King Adrastus reign, high-seated Gonoes's towers, and Hypericius that dwelt in fruitful Pelinan, and in divine Aegeus, with all the seaside borderers, and wide Halese's friends. To Agamemnon every town her native birth commends, in double 50 sable barks, with him a world of men, most strong and full of valor went, and he in triumph then put on his most resplendent arms, since he did overshine the whole heroic host of Greece in power of that design, who did in Lacedaemons rule the unmeasured concave hold, high Pharis, Sparta, Messi's towers, for doves so much extolled, Persia and Aegea's grounds, strong Laa, Etalon, Amyclas, Halos's harbour town, that Neptune beats upon. All these did Menelaus lead, his brother that in cries of war was famous. 60 ships conveyed these enemies to Troy in chief, because their king was chiefly injured there, in Helen's rape, and did his best to make them buy it dear. Who dwelt in Pylos' sandy soil, and Arene the fair, in Thrion near Alpheus' flood, and Epi full of air, in Cypariscus, Amphigen, and little Ptolaion, the town where all the Iliads dwelt, and famous Dorion, where all the muses opposite, in strife of poesy, to ancient Thamyris of Thrace did use him cruelly, he coming from Eurytus' court, the wise Icalian king, because he proudly durst affirm he could more sweetly sing than that Pierian race of Jove, who, angry with his vaunt, bereft his eyesight and his song, that did the ear enchant, and of his skill to touch his harp disfurnished his hand. All these in 90 hollow keels grave Nestor did command. The richly blessed inhabitants of the Arcadian land below Cylene's mount, that by Epitus' tomb did stand, where dwelt the bold near-fighting men who did in Pheneus live, and Orchomen, where flocks of sheep the shepherds clustering drive, in Rhipe, and in Stratia, the fair Mantinean town, and strong Enispe, that for height is ever weather-blown, Tegea, and in Stymphalus, Parasia strongly walled. All these Alcaeus' son to field King Agapenor called. In 60 barks he brought them on, and every bark well manned, with fierce Arcadians, skilled to use the utmost of a band. King Agamemnon on these men did well-built ships bestow, to pass the gulfy purple sea, that did no sea rights know. They, who in Hermon, Euphrasis, and Elis did remain, what Olen's cliffs, Alesius, and Myrcen did contain, were led to war by twice 2 dukes, and each 10 ships did bring, which many venturous Epeans did serve for burthening, beneath Amphimachus' charge, and valiant Thalpius, son of Eurytus, actor one, the other Cteatus. Diores Amaryncetes the other did employ, the fourth divine Polyxenus, Agasthenes' joy. The king of fair Angiotes, who from the Dulichius came, and from Echinus' sweet isles, which hold their holy frame, by ample Elis region, Meges Philides led, whom Duke Phyleus, Jove's beloved, begat, and whilom fled to large Dulichius, for the wrath that fired his father's breast. Twice 20 ships with ebon sails were in his charge addressed. The warlike men of Cephale, and those of Ithaca, woody Neritus, and the men of wet Crocelia, sharp Aegilipa, Samos' isle, Zacynthus' sea enclosed, Epirus, and the men that hold the continent opposed. All these did wise Ulysses lead, in council peer to Jove. 12 ships he brought, which in their course vermilion sterns did move. Thoas and Dremon's well-spoke son did guide the Aetolians well, those that in Pleuron, Olinon, and strong Pylene dwell. Great Calchas that by seaside stands, and stony Calydon, for now no more of Ennius' sons survived, they all were gone. No more his royal self did live, no more his noble son, the golden Meleager, now their glasses all were run. All things were left to him in charge, the Aetolians' chief he was, and 40 ships to Trojan wars the seas with him did pass. The royal soldier Idomen did lead the Cretans stout, the men of Knossos and the town of Gortina walled about. Of Lyctus and Miletus' towers, of white Lycastus' state, of Phaestus and of Rhytius, the cities fortunate, and all the rest inhabiting the 100 towns of Crete, whom warlike Idomen did lead, co-partnered in the fleet, with Kilmen Marion, 80 ships with them did Troy invade. Tlepolemus Heraclides, right strong and bigly made, brought 9 tall ships of war from Rhodes, with haughty Rhodians manned, who dwelt in 3 dissevered parts of that most pleasant land, which Lindus and Gelissus were, and bright Chimaeras called. Tlepolemus commanded these in battle unappalled, whom fair Astyoche brought forth by force of Hercules, led out of Ephyr with his hand from river Selleis, when many towns of princely youths he levelled with the ground. Tlepolem in his father's house, for building much renowned, brought up to headstrong state of youth, his mother's brother slew, the flower of arms, Lysimnius, that somewhat aged grew. Then straight he gathered him a fleet, assembling bands of men, and fled by sea to shun the threats that were denounced then by other sons and nephews of the Alcidan fortitude. He in his exile came to Rhodes, driven in with tempests rude. The Rhodians were distinct in tribes, and great with Jove did stand, the king of men and gods, who gave much treasure to their land. Nireus out of Simna's haven 3 well-built barks did bring, Nireus, fair Aglaea's son, and Charopus the king. Nireus was the fairest man that to fair Ilion came, of all the Greeks, save Peleus' son, who passed for general frame. But weak this was, not fit for war, and therefore few did guide, who did in Cassus, Nisyrus, and Crapathus abide, in Eurypylus' town, and in Calydna's soils. Pheidippas and bold Antiphus did guide to Trojan toils, the sons of crowned Thessalus, derived from Hercules, who went with 30 hollow ships well ordered to the seas. Now will I sing the sackful troops Pelasgian Argos held, that in deep Alus, Alope, and soft Trichina dwelled, in Phthia and in Helidae, where lived the lovely dames, the Myrmidons, Hellenians, and Archives robbed of fames, all which the great Aeacides in 50 ships did lead, for these forgat war's horrid voice, because they lacked their head, that would have brought them bravely forth, but now at fleet did lie, that wind-like user of his feet, fair Thetis' progeny. Wroth for bright-cheeked Briseis' loss, who from Lyrnessus' spoils, his own exploit, he brought away as trophy of his toils. When that town was depopulate, he sunk the Theban towers. Minetta and Epistrophus he sent to Pluto's bowers, who came of King Evenus' race, great Helipiades. Yet now he idly lives enraged, but soon must leave his ease. Of those that dwelt in Phylake and flowery Pyroson, the wood of Ceres, and the soil that sheep are fed upon, Iton and Antron built by sea, and Petelius full of grass. Protesilaus, while he lived, the worthy captain was, whom now the sable earth detains, his tear-torn faced spouse, he woefully left in Phylake, and his half-finished house. A fatal Dardan first his life of all the Greeks bereft. As he was leaping from his ship, yet were his men unleft, without a chief, for though they wished to have no other man, but good Protesilae, their guide, Podarces yet began to govern them, Iphitus' son, the son of Phylacus, most rich in sheep, and brother to short-lived Protesilaus. Of younger birth, less and less strong, yet served he to direct the companies, that still did more their ancient duke affect. Twice 20 jetty sails with him the swelling stream did take, but those that did in Pyrrhus dwell, at the Babean lake, in Bebe and in Glaphera, Iaoclus builded fair, in thrice 6 ships to Pergamus did through the seas repair, with old Admetus' tender son, Eumelus, whom he bred of Alceste, Peleus' fairest child of all his female seed. The soldiers that before the siege Methoni's vales did hold, Thaumacia, flowery Melobe, and Olyson the cold, Duke Philoctetes governed, in darts of finest sleight. 7 vessels in his charge conveyed they honorable freight, by 50 rowers in a bark, most expert in the bow. But he in sacred Lemnos lay, brought miserably low, by torment of an ulcer grown with Hydra's poisoned blood, whose sting was such, Greece left him there in most impatient mood. Yet thought they on him at his ship, and chose to lead his men, Medon, Oileus' bastard son, brought forth to him by Ren. From Trica, bleak Ithomens cliffs, and hapless Icale, Eurytus' city, ruled by him in wilful tyranny, in charge of Aesculapius' sons, physician highly praised, Machaon, Podalirius, were 30 vessels raised, who near Hyperia's fountain dwelt, and in Ormenius, the snowy tops of Titanus, and in Asterius, Avimon's son, Eurypylus, did lead into the field, whose towns did 40 black-sailed ships to that encounter yield, who Girton and Argissa held, Orthon and Elon's seat, and Chachioloosan were led by Polypete, the issue of Pirithous, the son of Jupiter. Him the Athenian Theseus' friend Hippodamie did bear, when he the bristled savages did give Rhamnusia, and drove them out of Peleus, as far as Ithaca. He came not single, but with him Leontius, Coron's son, an arm of Mars, and Coron's life Caeneus' seed begun. Twice 20 ships attended these. Gunius next did bring from Cyphus 20 sail, and 2 the Ennians following, and fierce Parabe that about Dodon's frozen mould did plant their houses, and the men that did the meadows hold, which Titaresius decks with flowers, and his sweet current leads into the bright Peneus that hath the silver heads. Yet with his admirable stream doth not his waves commix, but glides aloft on it like oil, for 'tis the flood of Styx, by which the immortal gods do swear. Teuthredon's honored birth, Protheus led the magnates forth, who near the shady earth of Peleus and Penion dwelt. 40 revengeful sail did follow him. These were the dukes and princes of a vale that came from Greece. But now the man that overshined them all, sing, Muse, and their most famous steeds to my recital call, that both the Atrides followed. Fair Phrygiades, the bravest mares, did bring by much. Eumelus managed these, swift of their feet as birds of wing, both of one hair did shine, both of an age, both of a height, as measured by a line, whom silver-bowed Apollo bred in the Pierian mead. Both slick and dainty, yet were both in war of wondrous dread. Great Ajax Telamon for strength passed all the peers of war, while vexed Achilles was away, but he surpassed him far. The horse that bore that faultless man were likewise past compare, yet lay he at the crooked stern ships, and fury was his fare. For Atreus' son's ungracious deed, his men yet pleased their hearts, with throwing of the holed stone, with hurling of their darts, and shooting fairly on the shore, their horse at chariots fed, on greatest parsley and on sedge that in the fens is bred. His princes' tents their chariots held, that richly covered were. His princes, amorous of their chief, walked storming here and there about the host, and scorned to fight, their breaths as they did pass before them flew, as if a fire fed on the trembling grass. Earth undergrown their high-raised feet, as when offended Jove in Erema Typhoeus with rattling thunder drove beneath the earth. In Erema men say the grave is still, where thunder tombed Typhoeus, and is a monstrous hill. And as that thunder made earth groan, so groaned it as they passed. They trod with such hard set down steps, and so exceeding fast. To Troy the rainbow-girded dame right heavy news relates, from Jove, as all to council drew in Priam's palace gates. Resembling Priam's son in voice, Polites, swift of feet, in trust whereof as sentinel, to see when from the fleet the Grecians sallied, he was set upon the lofty brow of aged Aeacides' tomb, and this did Iris show. O Priam, thou art always pleased with indiscreet advice, and framest thy life to times of peace, when such a war doth rise as threats inevitable spoil. I never did behold such and so mighty troops of men who trample on the mould, in number like autumnus' leaves, or like the marine sand, already round about the walls to use a ruining hand. Hector, I therefore charge thee most this charge to undertake. A multitude remain in Troy, will fight for Priam's sake. Of other lands and languages, let every leader then bring forth well armed into the field his several bands of men. Strong Hector knew a deity gave charge to this essay. Dismissed the council straight, like waves clusters to arms do sway. The ports are all wide open set, out rush the troops in swarms, both horse and foot, the city run with sudden cried alarms. A column stands without the town, that high his head doth raise, a little distant, in a plain trod down with divers ways, which men do Battalia call, but the immortals name Myrine's famous sepulchre, the wondrous active dame. Here were the auxiliary bands that came in Troy's defence, distinguished under several guides of special excellence. The Duke of all the Trojan power, great helm-decked Hector was, which stood of many mighty men, well skilled in darts of brass. Aeneas of commixed seed, a goddess with a man, and Chryses with the queen of love, the troops Dardanian led to the field. His lovely sire, in Ida's lower shade, begat him of sweet Cyprides. He solely was not made chief leader of the Dardan powers. Antenor's valiant sons, Archilochus and Acamas, were joined companions. who in Zelea dwelt beneath the sacred foot of Ida, that drank of black Aesepus' stream, and wealth made full of pride. The Aphne, Lycaon's son, whom Phoebus gave his bow, Prince Pandarus did lead to field, who addressed in us, of Pisa's city, Pityeia, and Mount Tereus, addressed us, and stout Amphius led, who did their sire displease, Merops Percosius, that excelled all Troy in heavenly skill of future searching prophecy, for, much against his will, his sons were agents in those arms, whom since they disobeyed the fates, in letting slip their threads, their hasty valours stayed, who in Percotes, Practicus, Arisba did abide, who Cestus and Abidas bred, Ertosides did guide. Prince Asius Ertosides, that, through great Siles' force, brought from Arisba to that fight the great and fiery horse. Pyleus and Hippothous the stout Pelasgians led, of them Larissa's fruitful soil before had nourished. These were Pelagian Pithous' sons, son of Teutomidas. The Thracian guides were Pyroas and valiant Acamas, of all that the impetuous flood of Hellespont enclosed. Euphemus the Ciconian troops in his command disposed, who from Troezenius Ciades right nobly did descend. Pyrechmes did the peons rule, that crooked bows do bend. From Axius, out of Amydon, he had them in command. From Axius, whose most beauteous stream still overflows the land. Pylaemon with the well-armed heart, the Paphlagonians led. From Ennis, where the race of mules fit for the plough is bred. The men that broad Cytorus' bounds, and Sesamus enfold, about Parthenius' lofty flood, in houses much extolled. From Chroma and Aegialus, the men that arms did bear, and Erythinus situate high, Pylaemon's soldiers were. Epistrophus and Dias did the Halazonians guide, far-fetched from Alabe, where first the silver mines were tried. Chromas and augur Enomus the Mysians did command, who could not with his auguries the strength of death withstand, but suffered it beneath the stroke of great Aeacides, in Xanthus, where he made more souls dive to the Stygian seas. Phorcys and fair Ascanius the Phrygians brought to war, well trained for battle, and were come out of Ascania far. With Metles and with Antiphus, Pylaemon's sons, did fight the men of Maion, whom the fen Gygia brought to light, and those Maionians that beneath the mountain Tmolus sprung, the rude unlettered Carabi, that barbarous were of tongue, that under Nastes colours march, and young Amphimachus, Nomaeon's famous sons, to whom the mountain Thyrorus, that with the famous wood is crowned, Miletus, Mycales, that have so many lofty marks for men that love the seas, the crooked arms Meander bode with his so snaky flood, resigned for conduct the choice of youth of all their martial brood. The fool Amphimachus to field brought gold to be his rack, proud girl-like that doth ever bear her dower upon her back, which wise Achilles marked, slew him, and took his gold in strife. At Xanthus' flood, so little death did fear his golden life. Sarpedon led the Lycians, and Glaucus unreproved, from Lycia and the gulfy flood of Xanthus far removed. End of the second book, Part 2.